Hi, Todd and James here with Homebrew Happy Hour, and today we're going to show you how to brew on the Brautag HERMS system. So the first thing you do is pour your grain in, but before you get to that point, you have to get everything up to temperature. So what you'll do is you'll raise the temperature on your hot liquor tank, which is this controller here. You can put it at the temperature that you want. Sometimes I overshoot it a little bit, turn it a little higher while it's getting up to temperature, and then turn it down when it's getting close. But it's really something that you'll work through. The most important thing is that you hit the temperature here. And what you want to do is be a little hotter than you would be for your mash temperature, what we call the strike, because remember, you got these grains at a different temperature and it's going to go down in temperature. So for this one, we calculated it to be about 158 degrees. I always check it with a thermometer to make sure before I start. We've already done that, and we know we're right at 158.
Yeah, and don't worry about it, because the fact that it's circulating through a heating coil, number one, you're not going to scorch the wort. Number two, it's going to get to temp real quick. So it's not real critical, but after a few brews and once you get used to your system, you'll know exactly where it needs to be. So I know that was been the case for us, and now I don't even think about it anymore.
Absolutely. All right, if you want to pour, I will stir. Excuse our backs here. So when you're pouring the grain in, you just want to do it nice and slow and stir the whole time so you don't get a lot of clumping. Again, you're going to be brewing, you're going to be doing this for an hour, so even if you do get a little clumping, they're going to break up as you're doing your mash, so don't be overly concerned about it.
And it is possible to do this by yourself. I have before. I just put a bucket over my shoulder and stir with one hand while I'm pouring with the other.
Yeah, I would say, James, between you and me, the vast majority of the time we do it by ourselves. So.
Yeah, that's right. It's looking good.
It is. Oh, I can smell it already. I love that smell.
Smells like breakfast cereal.
All right. I'm just going to continue to stir a minute here. I know that camera may have been blocked a little bit there, Josh, but now that the camera's open, you can see we're getting really good flow here. And that's what you want. You want it to flow well. If it's not flowing well, and you need to stir, just be aware there's a handle in here and you don't want to accidentally pull it up. So just stir carefully and make sure that everything is good. And we're flowing great. I mean, it looks perfect.
Oh yeah, it looks good. One tip on the handle, and what I do is when I drop the false bottom in, I make sure the handle's in the front. Because typically when you're stirring, you're not going to be stirring this way. You're going to be stirring this way. So there's less chance that you will grab the handle. Because if you think about it this way, if you pick it up, what's going to happen? Those grains are going to go under the false bottom. It's going to clog your pump up. You can clear it right back into the mash tun until it runs clear again. I guess you'd call that a boil off technically, but it's not a big deal. Just keep in mind there is a handle there. If we didn't have a handle, it'd be hard to get because it fits tight inside the bottom of the kettle.
And don't ever pull a Todd and not actually put the false bottom in. Always want to put the false bottom in before you heat your water up. So, although I say that, with this one, it's pretty easy to push it down, even if the water's hot.
We had the false bottom. It's perforated, and we found that works better versus slotting, because the slotting can kind of keep your efficiency from being where it needs to be. And another thing, too, is the whole false bottom is above the drain. And I like that because then we don't have to worry about a drain tube going through and could interfere. There is chance if you're stirring it, you can disrupt that, possibly, but I like the fact that the drain is underneath the false bottom. We don't have to worry about a tube. I like the way it works.
Well, it's looking good. We are mashing, and we'll probably give you a little break from our faces until we get to the next step.
All right, guys, just finished my, what we would call a mash out. And so when I do a mash out, I hold it at 168 degrees for about 15, 20 minutes. What that does, that stops any starch conversion or sugar conversion. So it holds the profile I want on a given recipe. Some people do, some people don't. Not a big deal. Like we always say on Homebrew Happy Hour, whatever works for you is what works. So I wanted to show you guys what we do on the Brautag to do a sparge. So we've got a sparge arm here, and what we'll do is we'll go ahead and switch this out. Go ahead and turn your wort pump off. You don't want to get burned. It's got stainless steel quick connects, so you just pull the collar back, put it in place, turn your pump back on, and there you go, you're sparging. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the hose placement so we can start moving this in. The water from the HLT is going to be our sparge water, and then we're going to move our wort into our boil kettle. So I'll show you how that works. First of all, let's turn everything off real quick pump-wise. I'm going to shut the valves off. That's very important. Even if it's a valve you don't use, shut them all off because you're going to be disconnecting hoses and you don't want any hot wort getting to you. Okay, so the first hose that we're going to move is going to be this long hose that goes to the coil. So be prepared. You're going to need a bucket because it's full of hot wort. And I'll just let that drain. You take it loose. You might want a pair of cotton gloves or brewer's gloves just so you don't burn yourself. My hands are already ruined. Okay, and then you'll use this hose later for cleaning, but for right now, you're not going to use it anymore. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using this hose, and we're going to move the output of the wort pump into the boil kettle. So let's go ahead and take that off now. Once again, take your hose off and let it drain. Connect it to the output of the wort pump. And then you're going to put this, the inlet of the boil kettle. Now, there is recirculation for the HLT, and what that does, that keeps the temperature the same from here to here, so it's always circulating. But when we go to sparge, we're going to use this to go on top of the wort as we call that a fly sparge, so we're slowly rinsing the sugars off the grain bed and moving the wort into the boil kettle. Once we have all that set up, we can turn our pumps on. Now, this part is a little tricky because what you want to do is you want to match the flow coming into the mash kettle going into the boil kettle. So what I normally do is I'll turn the water pump on with the valve closed and then just barely crack it, and you'll see that coming out. Now I'll open up my valve. Just make sure your hose ends are connected good. They're not going to leak. Open your inlet all the way, turn your wort pump on, and you want to match the flow going into the boil kettle with what is coming out of the mash tun, what's going into the mash tun. We're using a Blinkman Riptide pump, and the cool thing about that pump is it also has a valve on the pump. If you noticed, it was spitting pretty good because the flow was really high. You can choke it down here. The cool thing about these ball valves, you can adjust the flow however you need be. Once you get your system, you use it a few times, you'll understand what I'm saying. You'll get used to how you brew it is fine. Now, normally, I like to do a sparge for 45 minutes. So what I do is I'll set my timer for 45 minutes, and you just hold the set button down, go down to 45, and hit set again. After everything stops flashing, you're good to go. And then we'll just let that process continue. Keep an eye on your HLT water, so you want to make sure you don't want to run that dry. We have plenty. We have almost, we got 18.5 gallons in here, so there's no way we're going to put 18.5 gallons in there. Just make sure you don't want to run over, and you don't want to ever expose the heating element with it on, because it'll cook it and it's ruined and you'll have to buy another one. I've done that before. Okay, we'll see you at the boil. All right, looks like we're almost done with the sparge. So I shut off the inlet to the pump that's pumping wort into the boil kettle. And as you know, we've got our boil element. Let me turn the wort pump off too. This is the power output to the element in the boil kettle. So I've got it set to 100, and a little tip. There's our alarm for our, just turn your alarm off, or you can hit reset, and that works either way. Okay, so I collected about 17 gallons for a 15-gallon batch. In the past, I've thought it varies on what we lose. The kettles are pretty wide mouth, so evaporation's a lot bigger than if it was small mouth, or it seems to be on this one. So I'm gonna let that boil down to about 15 gallons, and that's usually gonna be about between 60 and 90 minutes. I always boil down to gravity. That's the way I've always done it. Depends on the efficiency and all that. So we're ready to go. We're at 189 degrees, 100% on our controller. As soon as you hit about 195 to 200 degrees, you're gonna wanna turn this down, I would say, to be safe, between 65 and 70. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna prevent that from boiling over, and you don't want that, it makes a mess. But until I get there, I'm at 190, I'm gonna go ahead and watch it. If you're gonna push it that far at 100%, you need to be standing over it so you can watch it. Another handy tip is if you've got a spray bottle with just distilled water in it, or RO water, you can have that handy and shoot a stream over the foam, and it'll completely dissipate. So it's not a bad idea to have one of those on hand. So we'll just wait for this to boil and add our hops and finish our beer, and when we'll come back, we'll show you how to cool it down. Okay, we're done boiling. Time to do the whirlpool, and that's a super simple thing. Just remember, you always have an inlet and outlet on the pump, so you're gonna have to swap those around from what we had existing. So what I like to do is I'll put the inlet as the bottom valve, and that will go into the inlet side of the pump, and then the outlet I'll put at the top valve. So once you connect those, just remember, inlet bottom valve, outlet top valve. And the reason why I like to do that is that when you get done whirlpooling and cooling, you're gonna wanna transfer. And if you transfer, you wanna transfer from this side, because this is suction. So the pump's pulling this, so we wanna pull off the bottom of the kettle so we get as much yield with as little trub as possible. That's why we do the whirlpool. When we do the whirlpool, it's gonna put all the particulates in the center of the kettle, so we'll get a cleaner pool. Okay, so I guess we'll get started. Open your valves, and it might bubble a little bit. No big deal. Turn your wort pump on, and you should start to see circulation. Now, I noticed you probably noticed that we have a cooling coil in here. We're fixing to hit the cooling cycle. I like to whirlpool a few minutes, and I keep it going when we do the cooling part. And we use 2 cooling coils. We use one to cool the water, that's going to cool the coils of the water flowing, and then we have a cooling coil for the wort. So it's real simple. Two run together. We've got cold water from the water hose going in here. In Texas, our water, hydrant water, is very warm. So what we'll do is we'll fill this bucket up. I don't know if you can see it, but we've got a coil in here. We'll fill this up with water and ice, so it's going to chill this section down, and it'll make it more efficient for the coil that's in here. Now, I always put these in 15 minutes before the end of the boil so that it can sanitize. And then I'm going to wait and let it whirlpool a little bit, and then we'll turn the water on, because we actually have a hop edition, a whirlpool edition. I like to put them in at 180 degrees. And we'll go to the chiller and transfer in a little bit.
Okay, our brew day is pretty much done now. All we have to do is get the wort into the fermenters, which is great on this system because you can actually use the pump. And one of the advantages is you always hear about oxidation in beer and you don't want oxygen. Okay, but right now you want oxygen. You want as much oxygen as possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this hose off, the hose on the top. I'm going to put a little extension on here so I can really shoot that wort into these buckets. And when I get a little wort in there, I'm going to add the yeast, and then I'm going to continue to put it in the buckets equally. And when we're done, I've already sanitized these lids. I've got a thermometer, which I actually don't need. I'm going to take that off. It's sanitized, and I have this knife, which I sanitized. And we're going to use that to cut these open, and we're going to put them in here. And then we're going to stick them over here in my closet where I have a very nice 68-degree temperature, and we're going to let them ferment. So let's get started. Again, I'm going to take this hose, which is sanitized. You can turn the pump off, or you can just stop the flow of the pump for a minute. Take this off. Still getting a little flow, of course. And put the hose on here. And you'll notice when I start this back up again, we are going to get some flow. Boom. So we got this flowing in pretty quickly. I always want to keep an eye on it, because when you get down to the bottom, you want to switch everything off. So we're putting, like I mentioned before, a little wort in here. And because I have this sanitized, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut this off for a second. I'm just going to lay the hose here. I'm going to go ahead and, by the way, this is a step that's really nice if you're brewing with somebody, that they can pour this in while you're doing it. This has a little rip on it, so I'm actually not going to use a knife. I forgot that these are pretty easy to rip open. I've already shaken these, but I'll show you in a second here what I always do. I just dump it in. One thing you got to be really make sure you do is don't dump 2 envelopes in one bucket and no envelopes in the other. So just shake it up. I've already done this quite a bit, but this particular liquid yeast does well with a little shake up. And I'm going to go to the next one. So remember, I just need to do the one on the left after I pour this one in. Good. This is Imperial Flagship, by the way. Great ale yeast. I've used it quite a bit, and we actually brewed a beer yesterday doing a test run, and it is fermenting away in there, and it has been since last night. It really started up quickly. I'm going to pour the last Flagship in here. So now we have yeast in all of these. So I can just take this back out. Remember, it's sanitized on the inside. Doesn't matter if you hold it on the outside. And I'm going to start this back up. I'm going to come way up here. So I'm really splashing that wort in. Again, I want as much oxygen as I can get in here. And that's a good way to do it. Now, a lot of times we actually use another fermenter, which is a glycol fermenter that holds 18 gallons of liquid. And when I do that, I can take this hose and go all the way where that fermenter is usually sitting and put it in there. So it doesn't really matter which fermenter you're using. This works the same for all of them. So, all right. So when we get these filled up, we'll come back and show you what we do next. All right, we almost have these full. It doesn't take very long at all, but I didn't think you'd even want to watch an extra 45 seconds of me pouring this in here, so we're getting really close now. So what I like to do, again, it's great if you have another person helping you, but when I get to this point, I don't want to stir this up very much because I took the time to do a whirlpool, but almost all this stuff, if you don't stir it up, it's going to kind of hang at the bottom, and you can get a lot more in here if you tilt it a little bit. Just kind of watch it, make sure you're not getting a bunch of trub, and we're done. That was it. So we can turn that valve off, we can turn this pump off, and now we're just about done. All we have to do is put the lids on, which, as I mentioned, are sanitized, but I saw a little bit of wort there, so I'm just going to dip this one in. And when you put these on, a lot of you have probably already done this, but we thought we'd kind of show how we do it. One thing I always like to do is check the inside of these buckets, make sure you don't have anything hanging over. We've had a lot of times when we thought we were not fermenting because we got a little piece of plastic from the inside of the lid or something else that went across there and kept it from sealing properly. So I always do one more visual inspection, even though I inspected them earlier. Get those on good and firm. And then you're going to do your air locks. So your air lock, a lot of you have, again, almost certainly used one of these before, but what I like to do is get the sanitizer up to a level. It's about halfway up, you can see, and put that on there. Everything's sanitized in this, and I just stick it in, and we're ready to go. I got 2 more of those to do, and we're done for the day. All we have to do now is clean up, my favorite part. Okay, now we're going to clean the coil, and at the same time we're going to clean the water pump, and then we'll also show you how to clean the wort pump. Very simple. So I've got water still in here. This is the hot liquor tank. So I'm going to use that initially to flush the system out. You're going to have a lot of stuff in the coil typically when you brew, so you want to make sure you get it nice and clean. Now, I'm going to mention right now that if you don't remember to clean this, you can always clean it the next time you brew, but you're going to probably have the valves closed, you're going to open it up, it's going to shoot out some fermented stuff that smells really bad. So hey, go ahead and clean it in the beginning, it's a lot better. I speak from experience. All right, so I'm going to turn the pump on. You see we immediately got flow, and you see the brown stuff coming out. That's good, that's what we want to get rid of. That is wasted wort. It's sad, sad sight, right? All right, now we've gone clear. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop this pump, and I'm actually going to take the hose and put it in this bucket here. I should probably turn this valve off. And I'm going to start it again. And now what I'm doing is I'm actually pulling some Brew Clean, a good cleaner, and I'm running that through. And Brew Clean kind of has a feel to it. You can tell when you get to Brew Clean because it starts to, there now, I just hit Brew Clean. So I know I've got Brew Clean in the whole thing. I'm going to turn it off. And I like to let this sit a few minutes. And while we're letting that sit, we'll go over and clean the other pump. So while this is sitting, remember the Brew Clean will kind of sit in there and get all the rest of the gunk out, and then you run just some clean water through after that to flush the system. I always like to leave these valves open. If you got anything in there and you close them, it's going to ferment and it's going to shoot out when you open them later. So I like to leave them open. So next, I'll walk over, and this is our other pump. Same type of a thing, except with this one, we don't have any water to shoot right in here, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to take this hose off, put it in here, and let's see. We have that running into the pump, this running out. This is what we used in the earlier video when we showed putting the wort into the. There we go. Okay, so notice it's not flowing. That's not unusual at all, because sometimes you got to kind of prime this thing a little bit. One way to do that is to lift up on this valve. Another way is to just pour some liquid in there like this. Actually, it started flowing, so I don't have to do that, but you can prime it by pouring a little liquid in there. But you can see we're getting some really good, I know that's Brew Clean. So now I've filled both of these full of Brew Clean. That's in the pump, it's in the coil. All I'm going to do now is just get some nice fresh water, and after I let them sit for a few minutes, I'm going to run some fresh water through just like I did that. And now everything's nice and clean for the next time you brew. You don't have to worry about taking the pumps apart or doing anything else. All you got to do next time you brew is just start the process. All right, we're done. We have brewed a nice batch of beer. Interestingly enough, today we brewed a pale ale, but we're testing some new hops. So we're doing 7 of these. And in a future episode of Homebrew Happy Hour, we're going to go through those 7. I think you'll enjoy that as well. So we're done brewing. We've got the first part of the cleanup done. Now all we do is just take these kettles. I usually take them outside, and I give them I fill them full of Brew Clean, or at least put some Brew Clean and hot water in the bottom. Take a nice sponge and sponge them out, get all this stuff out, rinse everything, and you're ready to go. One thing I would say though is be careful what you use on the inside. You don't want to use like a really aggressive Brillo pad or something like that, because you can scratch the markings and you can even scratch the stainless steel. So just use something nice and soft and give it a good cleaning and put it up, and we're ready to brew next time.